Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Stats Show. Today we're going to take a look at Game Week 2 and everything that you're going to need in order to prepare yourself best for this game week. If you do enjoy, make sure to leave a like and subscribe as well. It would be massively appreciated. But before we get into things, we are going to take a look at how Game Week 1 got on first. So we've got our results on screen here. A very goal-fested type game week. A lot of goals for a lot of teams. We've got a lot of 3-0s, 4-0s, 3-1s and a 4-2 from Liverpool and Bournemouth, which we are going to be starting off with. Now, one thing that I did really want to mention with this game was the fact that obviously Bournemouth did score 2 goals. Now, if you have kind of kept up with my content, you would know that I took Virgil van Dijk out fairly late on towards the deadline, purely because I wasn't too convinced on Liverpool's defence. Now, I can bring up this screenshot here from the game on Friday night, and you can basically see how Bournemouth managed to expose Liverpool's defence. Now, I kind of used this as my example as well with the attacking fullbacks of Frimpong and Kerkez getting so far forward that when a team counter-attacks Liverpool, they are essentially going to be left with just Van Dijk and whoever the centre-back is going to be, so whether that's going to be Konate or someone else. Now, you can basically see it here with Semenyo on the counter-attack. Only 2 Liverpool defenders back, and you've got, almost 4 Bournemouth attackers making their way towards Liverpool's half. So I can see this happening quite a lot with Liverpool, and I think it is going to be a way that teams are going to score against Liverpool, and I don't know if you're going to see as many clean sheets, at least off the start, until the team properly gels together, as you would, potentially hope for. But that's just kind of what I got from that game, and it's really what I can see happening with a lot of Liverpool's fixtures. And obviously they have Newcastle in the next game, where someone like Anthony Gordon could very easily expose that, and of course Anthony Elanga, who I think he actually recorded the fastest time in the Premier League last year. So counter-attacks from Newcastle could be absolutely huge next week. And of course, I think the week after that, they're playing against Arsenal. So maybe someone like a Martinelli, if he does play in that game, could do really nicely. Now, in terms of Saturday's games, Aston Villa and Newcastle, there wasn't really too much to look at. I don't think Aston Villa looked that great, and Newcastle were a lot more solid than I first would have expected, to be honest. But Brighton and Fulham, another game where Brighton were so close to keeping a clean sheet, and Fulham ended up, just ruining their day in the last minute. I think it was a 97th minute goal from Muniz, but so close for anyone who did own Brighton players. With Sunderland and West Ham, now this is one that definitely was a big surprise. Sunderland winning 3-0 on the opening day of the season, and to be honest, West Ham just didn't really look too great at all. However, I do think the result was kind of, it did favour Sunderland a lot more than the stats kind of showed. West Ham only did have 0.7 expected goals conceded against Sunderland, despite conceding 3 goals, which was actually the 6th best in the league over the entire weekend. So it's not really that awful, but defensively West Ham just didn't really look great at all. And 3 goals to Sunderland is absolutely unforgivable, and you can kind of look at their upcoming fixtures. Game week 2, they're playing against Chelsea. Game week 3, Nottingham Forest. Game week 4, Spurs. 3 teams where you really could be looking at attackers to target in that match for potential captaincies as well. Obviously, Chelsea have a lot of attackers that are well owned in Cole Palmer and João Pedro. Nottingham Forest, you've got Chris Wood, who just picked up 2 goals as well over the weekend, and obviously Spurs as well. Maybe Eberechi Eze will be signing by the time game week 4 comes around. He could be a really nice option, or Dominic Solanke or Richarlison as well. Now, I don't think it was all bad for West Ham. Diouf really did show some signs of someone who could be a decent player. However, he kind of does, give me glimpses of someone like Leif Davis last year, who picked up a lot of assists and was a really good attacking threat, but Ipswich just weren't good enough defensively for him to be a decent enough FPL option. That could kind of be what Diouf does show this year. Because West Ham really don't look great, and I don't know if they're going to keep a lot of clean sheets over the course of the season. Diouf did look decent. He had a very clear shot on goal that did get blocked by a defender, that would have 100% have been a goal as well. So another day, Diouf probably would have been a very highly owned, highly transferred in player this week, but it was blocked. But I think he's got a very good chance of picking up a lot of goals, a lot of assists this year. I just don't see West Ham really keeping any clean sheets. or many clean sheets on that hand. Now with Spurs and Burnley, that obviously finished 3-0 to Spurs, and I thought Spurs actually had a really, really good game. You can see their stats along to the right as well. For expected goals, they were second. I think it was just below Manchester City with 2.33. They were fifth for shots with 16 total shots. Now crosses was something that we did see a lot of from Spurs this week. They completed 27, or they had 27 crosses, and 8 of those were successful. Now obviously with their striker, you know, with the profile of their strikers, the likes of Solanke and Richarlison, two players that can really get their head on the ball, players that are going to benefit a lot from crosses, and of course a lot of popular options like Kudus, like Porro, two options that are going to be putting in the crosses as well. So Spurs are going to continue that kind of style of play with a lot of crosses into the box. I could really see the likes of Pedro Porro and Kudus on the wing, potentially Eze if he does play out on the wing as well, picking up a lot of assists this year. And, you know, the target man, whether it is going to continue to be Richarlison or Solanke when he is fully fit, scoring a lot of goals as well. So a lot of promise for the likes of Spurs. You know, they've done really well attacking wise. Defensively, still a little bit of problems. You know, 0.9 expected goals conceded to Burnley, which was the 7th best in the league, which isn't really too great when, you know, you consider the opponent. And they also conceded 14 attempts to Burnley as well. Now obviously playing against Manchester City in game week 2, that is definitely something you might want to consider, that we are going to talk about a little bit later when it comes to captaincy. Now more on Manchester City, obviously the big man in that match was Reinders, who was only 5.5 million and, you know, quickly became a very popular choice within about the last week before the deadline. Obviously had a great game, picking up 10 points against Wolves for Man City. And you know, when you look at the team ranking, second, third, fourth, the majority of stats that were available and did play the full 90 minutes as well. Someone that I'm definitely, you know, obviously after game week 1 you have to have him in your plans since he is that cheap, but someone that I'm going to be keeping an eye on for the first couple of weeks. He is the most transferred player in this week, which again we will look at very, very soon. But I don't really know if it's as justified as, you know, the stats kind of show it to be. He only had 3 shots, you know, 1 shot on target, which did provide the goal. He had 1 key pass, you know, 0.2 expected assists, obviously providing an assist in there as well. But I do think, you know, when looking at those stats, it could easily have blanked, you know, that week. You know, 1 key pass, 1 shot on target, just managed a goal and an assist from that as well. So obviously someone who provided 10 points this week, but I think could easily end up on 2, you know, in the next week, and maybe 2 again after that. But he's definitely one that I do want to keep an eye on. And I think with his minutes as well, if he does continue to hit, you know, 80 plus or 90 minutes in every single game coming up over the next few game weeks, and I think at that point you can decide, yep, he's going to come into my team at only 5.5 million, where he does provide really, really nice value. But at the end of the day, it is only game week 2. You don't want to be jumping into anything too quickly, and I believe he's got over 600,000 transfers now already. I would be trying to save your transfers as much as possible over the first couple of weeks, and I don't think Reinders is someone who's going to be producing huge hauls every single week based on his stats from game week 1, so I think you can easily hold off on that and wait to get some more information. With Chelsea and Palace, obviously it was 2 teams that, you know, 2 very good teams that kind of went up against each other. I wouldn't be too worried about none of their attackers really producing anything in that match, because they are 2 very solid defences, and I definitely would be giving them another couple of weeks. With Forest and Brentford, Forest obviously were struggling to score goals over the first or over pre-season, and they did pretty much dismantle Brentford quite easily with a last minute, or you know, towards the end penalty, wiping out the Nottingham Forest clean sheet, which wasn't too great. But Brentford really didn't look too great at all. Definitely a team again that you could potentially look to target over the next few weeks. I thought Man United and Arsenal was a very surprising game. Man United just looked a lot better than Arsenal did. Obviously it is first game of the season, it was at Old Trafford as well. But I thought a lot of the new signings for Man U looked really promising. I thought Cunha looked really nice, and Buemo looked really nice as well. Even Dorgu at 4.5 million as the left back. I know he's not a new signing, but he looked pretty promising as well, hitting the post with a really good strike as well. He could be someone, when Man United's fixtures do look a bit better, they could definitely be some guys to consider. Then we've got Leeds Everton as well. I watched that on Monday night and it was a bit of a bore fest, to be honest. Could have easily been 0-0, but Leeds looked a lot better than Everton did. Everton not really creating too much at all, and Dye was pretty quiet. Dewsbury Hall was probably one of Everton's better players, but he was also pretty quiet as well. So I think I'll give it another week or two with any Everton attackers that you do own. If they do continue to look quite weak in attack, then potentially we could look to move some of those guys on. Now moving on to this week's fixtures, we do have another round of a full weekend. We've got a Friday night game, we've got a Monday night game as well, and I think that Newcastle-Liverpool game is going to be one of the standouts of the week. Got a couple of other interesting ones in there. Arsenal versus Leeds. You would expect Arsenal to do pretty nice in that one. Burnley and Sunderland, obviously after Sunderland's game week 1 performance, that could be a very interesting one. I think the stats do favour Burnley in this game, which we will have a wee look at, but Sunderland obviously done fantastic, winning 3-0 in game week 1, and Burnley obviously lost 3-0 as well. I think Palace and Forest is going to be a really interesting one, along with Man City and Spurs. But as we take a look at our clean sheet odds for this week, then it is Arsenal at the top with 53%, head and shoulders above any other team, with Bournemouth and Burnley in its second with 35%. Now, if you do own Burnley defenders, which you probably do, someone like Dubravka, someone like Esteve, there could be some options available this week if you do want to throw one of them in your starting 11. I don't think it is going to be the worst idea. However, if you are like me and own someone like a Sanchez from Chelsea, Chelsea are just a little bit below Burnley for clean sheet odds, and I would personally just back the better defence whenever it is possible. So I probably will be playing Rob Sanchez in goals over Dubravka, but I do have Esteve as well, and he could potentially make it into the starting 11 with third highest clean sheet odds of the week. A team really low, Spurs, if you own someone like Van de Ven, maybe Pedro Porro. I think Porro a little bit less than Van de Ven. Van de Ven I would definitely be benching this week. Porro could definitely get you, a potential attack and return this week as well. I did make the mistake last year of benching Pedro Porro against Manchester City, and I think that was a week he picked up a 17-pointer. So that could be something that you do keep in mind as well. West Ham up against Chelsea as well, another team that you probably want to be benching if you do own Diouf or Wan-Bissaka. Nottingham Forest don't have the highest clean sheet odds either. However, obviously DEFCON players from last year that you could potentially want to just play, hope for a clean sheet, or maybe pick up 3 or 4 points along the way as well, with Murillo, maybe Milenkovic or Nico Williams. As we move into goal projections, obviously the teams meant to score the most goals, we do have Man City at the top. Again, like I said, a fixture against Spurs at home. Spurs did concede a lot of chances still, or at least a lot of shots against Burnley. Man City are projected to score 2.48 goals. So if you do have any Manchester City attackers, someone like Erling Haaland could do really well this week. Arsenal as well, this was the fixture that we did look at pre-deadline, that Arsenal would be the best fixture for them, and a potential captaincy for the likes of Bukayo Saka or Gyökeres. Something we did get confirmed pretty much was the fact that Gyökeres will be the penalty taker for Arsenal. That was some news that did come out over this week. So if you do own Gyökeres, a very decent captaincy opportunity for him, despite not really looking too great in game week 1. I would expect him to at least get something against Leeds, especially with the news that Kai Havertz has picked up an injury, which could see him out for a little while. You could be looking at 90 minutes over the next few weeks for someone like Victor Gyökeres. So a really nice captaincy option for him as well. Bournemouth up there too. Semenyo obviously played fantastically in game week 1, another option that you could go for. And of course Evan Nilsson as well, who looks like he will be taking the penalties while Justin Kluivert is out injured. Your usual suspects as well with Liverpool and Chelsea up there. You've also got Crystal Palace, where you could potentially look at Mateta or Eze if he is still in the team. Down at the other side of the table, you've got Wolves in at 19th. Strand Larson is going to be someone that you are going to want to be benching. Even though on paper Bournemouth away isn't actually that bad a fixture, the stats really don't suggest that Wolves are going to score a lot of goals in this match. And at 17th as well, Nottingham Forest, if you have Chris Wood, he could be a potential benching for you as well. The same with Spurs. You know, maybe if you do own somehow a Richarlison and done well in game week 1, they aren't expected to do too well against Manchester City in game week 2. Now, looking a little bit further ahead than just game week 2, we have the best defensive fixtures over the next 6 game weeks, and we have 7 teams available here. Now, this is according to Fantasy Football Hub's table. I have used the fixture ticker for the difficulties, but the order of teams is based off of the best defensive fixtures over on Fantasy Football Hub, which, of course, if you don't want to sign up, the link is down in the description, and you can see the whole list of teams for this. But Aston Villa do have the best defensive fixtures, which is why I am so surprised to see someone like Ezri Konsa being transferred out. We have the top transfers in and top transfers out here as well, with Ezri Konsa and at the third highest transferred out player, over 350,000 transfers out this week. Now, obviously, he did pick up a red card, so I can see why a lot of people have decided to move on from him. However, he is only going to be missing one match, which is going to be Brentford away in game week 2, but when he does come back, you're going to still have some very favourable fixtures with Crystal Palace at home, Everton away, Sunderland away, Fulham at home and Burnley at home over the next 5 game weeks. So he's someone easily that you just bench this week. Again, we don't want to be using early transfers where possible, so I would just be benching him this week against Brentford, and then you can easily bring him back in over the next couple of weeks at whatever fixture you really want to target. For Aston Villa, obviously not ideal that he did pick up the red card, but he still picked up a 3-pointer in that game as well. So there's really no downfalls to him picking up that red card, apart from the fact that you are forced to bench him in game week 2. Personally, I'd just be keeping him, bench him this week, and then look forward to his upcoming fixtures in the next few. Man United also up there with good defensive fixtures. I think a lot of those points do come from Burnley at home in game week 3 and Sunderland at home in game week 7. A lot of those fixtures in between don't really look too great. I wouldn't expect clean sheets against Man City, Chelsea in there, to be honest. But Burnley at home and Sunderland at home in game week 3 and 7 for Man U is really nice if you did want to potentially go for someone like Dorgu. For Bournemouth, obviously if you're a Petrovic owner, they have pretty nice fixtures over the next few weeks. That Liverpool fixture is now out of the way in game week 1, and they are now coming into a really nice run of fixtures. So Bournemouth players, if you do have them, definitely one to keep long term, and if you don't have them, potentially one to be looking at bringing in over the next couple of weeks. We've also got Palace coming in here as well. I think the next 2 fixtures aren't going to look too great. I'm not against Nottingham Forest at home, to be honest. I don't think that's too bad. Aston Villa in game week 3 will probably be a tough one, but after that, Sunderland at home, West Ham away, you could easily be looking at back-to-back clean sheets for Palace defenders. If you want, Munoz, maybe Lacroix, maybe Richards as well, there is a lot of options you can go for. I think game week 4 is going to be the time to bring in Palace defenders. For Nottingham Forest, again, really nice fixtures over there, obviously excluding the Arsenal and Newcastle games in game week 4 and game week 7. There is some really good fixtures for Nottingham Forest defenders who you would really be expecting clean sheets from. They were one of the one of the best teams for clean sheets last year. And this year, West Ham at home, Burnley away, Sunderland at home. Over the next 5 game weeks, you would really be hoping for 3 clean sheets in those games. Newcastle in there as well, although defenders don't really, pop out to you from that team. For Everton as well, they're in there. I think Tarkowski's really going to be the only option that you can potentially go for. They don't have the best fixtures, but they don't have terrible ones either. Moving on to the attacking fixtures, it is Bournemouth at the top of this list, so even more reason to bring in someone like Semenyo, someone like Evan Nilsson. They do have fantastic attacking fixtures. I do really like them both as a pick. Personally, I ended up going for Morgan Rogers over Semenyo in game week 1, and right now I'm heavily regretting it because of how well Semenyo did in game week 1 and with how good a run Bournemouth do have. However, Aston Villa are still sitting at second on this list as well, so 2 7 million midfielders that do look like very good picks over the next few game weeks is Morgan Rogers and Semenyo. I'm not the biggest fan of making transfers in game week 2, but if you are really feeling the FOMO on someone like Semenyo, I think now is a really good time to bring him in if you did want to avoid that Liverpool game in game week 1. Man United are still up there as well with attacking fixtures. Bruno could be a really nice pick. week, obviously for defensive contributions, penalties, and even though he is playing a bit deeper, he will still get attacking returns. But like I said at the start, Cunha and Mbeumo do look really, really nice, and had a fantastic game against Arsenal. So I think when those easier fixtures come in, Fulham away, Burnley at home, Sunderland at home in a few weeks' time, you could really see some hauls from those guys. Everton, again, not really the biggest fan of any of their attackers. I will be giving it a couple more weeks, for the likes of Ndiaye. I will give him Brighton, I will give him Wolves, and then I might be looking to move him on in game week 4. But still some really nice fixtures on paper for Everton. For Wolves, Strand Larsen is really the main guy in there, but there is some links, bringing him to potentially towards Newcastle, depending on what happens. With Isak, with Wissa, he is on the list as well. But Wolves do have some decent fixtures over the next few. I think Strand Larsen's probably one that you do want to just be rotating if the option does come along. Fulham, there's not really a lot of attackers really that we need to talk about there, and of course Arsenal. Outside of Leeds at home, Gyökeres, I think if you started with him, great. But I think game week 3, 4, 5 and 6 are going to be very difficult fixtures for Arsenal, up against some very, very solid defences. Liverpool away, Nottingham Forest at home, Man City at home and Newcastle at home. Personally, if I'm being honest, I wouldn't be looking at any Arsenal players right now. I don't think they look too great in game week 1, very reliant on set pieces to get their goals, which we did see a lot last season. But other than Leeds at home this week, I wouldn't really be wanting to play them, or expect a lot from them over the next 4 weeks. So I would be giving it a miss. If you started with them, great. Obviously this Leeds fixture could, potentially see 4 or 5 goals for Arsenal. But afterwards, I don't really think it's looking too promising. So it's one of those ones where I wouldn't buy, but I definitely wouldn't sell either, with Arsenal, and obviously potential captaincy options for this week as well. Speaking on the captaincy options, we have our captaincy poll again this week. Now this poll is live, so if you want to jump over to my Twitter, it is down in the description, or you've got the @ in the top right hand corner if you want to go and vote. We have 245 total votes so far. Mohamed Salah is leading the way with 86 votes, which is 35% of the total. Now he's obviously playing against Newcastle away. It is going to be a pretty difficult fixture, especially considering, one, how defensively solid Newcastle were against Aston Villa last week, and that was away from home as well. And I think, two, because there's a bit of a vendetta right now between Newcastle and Liverpool with this whole Isak transfer saga. So I wouldn't be surprised if Newcastle were right up for this game. The fans are going to be right up for this game, and I think it's going to be a very difficult one for Mohamed Salah. And now, based on Liverpool's performance in game week 1, Ekitike was in the area a lot, Wirtz was in the area a lot, Gakpo was involved, Salah, a little bit less, I would say, than the rest of them, is of course going to be involved over the course of the season, but I don't think I would be expecting 2-3 goals from him this week. So I think if I was on captaincy this week, my preference would be Erling Haaland if I could captain anyone in the game. I think if you do own Haaland, he's definitely going to be your captaincy pick, again because Burnley obviously managed 14 shots against Spurs still in game week 1. And when you look at his form, he's absolutely on fire right now. He's scored in his last 5 matches. He's got 2+ returns in 2 of his last 5 matches. And he just looks all round like a fantastic player with a home fixture as well, which our other 2 candidates don't have. He is leading the way for goal odds by a significant amount as well, with 60% as opposed to Salah and Palmer's 42%. And he is playing against the worst defence, obviously. We are just basing this off game week 1, so there isn't a lot of info you can take from this, but Spurs did concede 0.9 expected goals conceded, whereas Newcastle was only 0.2, which was the best in the league in game week 1, and West Ham 0.7. So personally, if I was captaining anyone this week, it would be Erling Haaland, who does look absolutely fantastic for the start of the season and for this game against Spurs. I don't have him myself. Personally, captaincy is still well up in the air. I do have Evan Nilsson, who could be the captaincy. I do have Watkins as well, and Cole Palmer is also going to be in my thoughts as well. I think I'm not going to be captaining Mohamed Salah for game week 2. That is just something that I'm going to be ruling out, just because Newcastle do look a little bit more solid than I did expect. So Salah's not going to be taking the armband for me, but I will potentially look at some outside options as potential differentials. Finally, we're going to take a look at the defensive contributions from Game Week 1 now. This graphic has the top 5 for defenders and midfielders last week, and it's also got some of the popular picks down below them. So Virgil van Dijk picked up 21 defensive contributions, which was number 1 for Game Week 1. He was the highest for that, which was great, especially if you own Van Dijk. Again, obviously, stated my concerns over the Liverpool defence and potentially not getting as many clean sheets as you would hope from them. But definitely still one that you can pick up for defensive contributions. Max Lacroix as well, another one we did expect to do really well for them this year. He picked up the points. Now, a very surprising one was Ryan Aït-Nouri at 6 million, obviously a premium defender. Was brought in by a lot of people for attacking contributions, but he does also clearly show up for defensive ones as well with 15, and he did pick up the 2 points this week as well. Senesy's in there, and of course James Tarkowski, who was top last year for DEFCONs. Some other popular picks in there were Saliba. What you could see from Arsenal players this year is when they do play against a top team away from home, like a Liverpool, like a Man United, like a Man City, they will just park the bus. The likes of Saliba, Gabriel could have a decent chance at defensive contributions there because they do play a lot more defensive against some of the bigger teams. Hilarious that we do see Ola Aina in there as well for Nottingham Forest after basically ruling him out across the Nottingham Forest defence as the worst pick available, and he's the one that did pick up the defensive contributions. Obviously Murillo is in there as well. Milenkovic did just miss out down in that bottom right hand corner with 8. I don't think Nico Williams was too far either. I think he was about 6 or 7 over the course of the weekend, but there is a lot of popular picks as well, the likes of Joachim Anderson, Chris Richards at 4.5. Those guys just missed out as well. Obviously we aren't going to see defensive contribution points every single week, but as long as we are seeing those players hit 7-8, you can kind of rely on them picking it up most weeks. We've got some midfielders over the other side as well. Marcus Tavernier and Tyler Adams, both from Bournemouth, picking up 19 and 20. Mats Weifer from Brighton picked up 18. Andre from Wolves with 15. And even Odegaard as well managed the defensive contributions with 14. Obviously midfielders need 12, which is why the likes of Bruno Fernandes and Elliot Anderson just missed out by 1. It could have been a very different game week for both of them if they did manage to pick it up. Pap Sarr at only 5 million picked up the 10 as well, so just missed out as well. And also Mohamed Salah managed 10 defensive contributions. I don't think we're going to see that a lot over the course of this season, but it is definitely a funny one to look at, but I don't think that we're going to see a lot of defensive contribution points from him. Wan-Bissaka, Munoz, and of course Milenkovic as well just in there. But that's going to be it for today. If you did enjoy the video, make sure to leave a like. We do have the Game Week 2 stats squad, which for me, I've put together an 11 which, according to all of the stats that we've just looked at, could potentially be the best 11 that you could go for Game Week 2. So if you get any ideas from this, make sure to let me know down in the comments section. Make sure to subscribe as well, because we're going to have the stats show every single week, and make sure as well, as I already mentioned, to leave a like. It would be massively appreciated. If you're looking for more FPL content, there is some videos on screen right now which you can go have a look at. My team selection will be out tomorrow, so make sure to turn on notifications for that. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.